So today is Thursday, May 10th, 2012, and we are in the Payne Gentry house, and we are talking to visitors from Bowling Green, Missouri, is that correct?
Correct.
And we are talking to, I'm sorry?
James Schuette. I was grandson of Bernard Schuette, and Bernard was the son of Heinrich Schuette, was the one that settled over here first in 1870.
Well, he was born in 1841,
Yeah.
immigrated 1867, and we're trying to ascertain whether he was the original owner of the property or if someone had it before him.
Well, first let's backtrack and introduce your wife is
I'm Myrna Judy.
Myrna. Well, we just want a little background first about you. Your first name is James?
Correct.
And James, where were you born?
I was born in Overland, and my mother died when I was 9, so I moved in with my grandparents on Long Road.
I see. So that's how you came to live on Long Road. When you were 9 and you came to Long Road, was this called Bridgeton or Pattonville? What did they call it?
It was more, now we heard Robertson, I think the mailing address was Bridgeton, but like she said, we've heard Anglin mentioned too.
Sure, yes.
I come here in 1953.
Okay.
So
And how old were you then?
I was 9 years old.
And where did you go to school when you came here?
I went to St. Mary's grade school.
And you were, what, about in 3rd grade, I suppose? Did they have individual grades then?
Yes, they did. That wasn't, years ago, I guess. The old church was still there, as what I can remember, and they had the hall there, which would, kind of like to see some of them now when you get a little older, but.
Not there anymore. That's why it's so important for us to interview people, because many of our churches, buildings, places are not here anymore. And getting back to what you said, you are living in Bowling Green, Missouri, and you made a special trip here today to find out information. Is that correct?
Correct. We wanted to really learn who actually built the house on Long Road that we lived in. My grandparents we got a picture of my great-grandfather and my grandfather in front of the house with 3 teams of horses, and we wanted to learn, who actually owned the house originally. Being as I was so young, and my parents died, so I didn't really know much, and she would ask questions, and I didn't have the answers. So the more we dug into it, I was interested in it, but you asked questions, and for some reason the old German people didn't talk much about it, so.
I think that is sad, that a lot of times when people left countries to come to the United States, they maybe wanted to leave it behind and become American. And I think that I'm guilty of that with my grandparents that came from Europe as well. But let's get back to you and talk to you a little bit about growing up in Bridgeton. And Myrna, and you said you were from Florissant?
Well, originally my family was in North St. Louis, and they moved out to Florissant when I was in 3rd grade.
About the same time that you came
Right.
to
Same year,
Bridgeton.
1953.
That's
and then we
interesting.
got married in 65, and we lived in Florissant
Well,
for 37 years.
Where did you go to school then?
I went to Hazelwood, to
Okay.
Elm Grove Grade School, which is no longer there either.
And getting back to James, did you then continue your education here in Bridgeton?
I went to St. Mary's grade school and graduated from 8th grade, and then I went to Pattonville High School, back when the old McDonald hamburger was out there.
What do you mean McDonald hamburger? What do
Well,
you mean?
the old McDonald hamburger that had the arch built right into back in the 50s and 60s, I don't know if you remember any, it was one of the original ones,
But where was it located?
It was located close to, I guess you'd call it St. Anne's, but it was located close to Pattonville High School. The original one they tore down, I don't know, back in the...
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, we came down here, we used to, go to Northwest Plaza, and you could look right across the road, and there was the old high school. Well, come down one day, and the old high school was gone.
Oh, I see. Well, so you lived here when Northwest Plaza was being first built?
Correct.
What did you think of it? Building a
mean,
great big thing like Northwest
We
Plaza?
didn't get around back then. I mean, my grandparents, which I was raised with, they didn't get around, and I didn't get around as much, Our growing up was mainly right around our farm, and we would go down, there was a tavern down on Natural Bridge, I don't know. There was a little confectionery. Me and my cousin used to ride down there and we'd get a quart of ice cream and ride up and sit on the hill along the road and cut it in half and eat it. So.
Well, I think it was the Bridgeton Tavern, is that what you're referring
Correct,
to?
correct.
Yeah, I think it was just taken down not too long ago. I don't remember exact year.
And your dad died when you were young too, so he didn't
Yeah.
have a car or his father to transport him around. So he really did spend a lot of his time there on the farm.
Yeah, he died in 1957.
I see. What did your grandparents do?
They were truck farmers. We raised everything that you can imagine. We had your tomatoes, cabbage, peppers, green beans, butter beans. We had a vineyard. We had 2 different kinds of grape, your Concord grapes. We had an orchard with 2 different kinds of apples, your red and your golden delicious. We had peaches, had 2 different kinds of peaches. And for a small farm, we were very self-sufficient. But I mean, that's something that
And tobacco.
yeah, I mean, years ago, they used to say, my grandfather used to say, raise tobacco, and then, he rolled his own. If you know anything about your German people, they're very self-sufficient. And we could, other than buying, your sugar, flour, we just, we raised, we had eggplants, we raised hogs. We always had 2 horses, because you used the horses when I was first there. I mean, everything was pulled by horses, everything. And we had hogs, so you had 4 different kinds of sausage. You'd raise, you have your pork sausage, liver sausage, blood sausage, and then you had summer sausage, which they would hang in the smokehouse to cure, and I mean, back in the 50s, this was I would think it was kind of dated for that area down there. I mean, if you moved northeast Missouri where we're at now, I would think some of that was more prevalent up there, but in fact, I still buy blood sausage. I love it. And people have never eaten it, they really don't know, they get this idea.
Did you have brothers or sisters?
Yeah, pardon me?
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
No, I didn't, I was an only child.
So as an only child, you came to live with your grandparents on Long Road. Were you expected to help them?
Oh yeah, when you're on the farm, you're expected to do your part. We raised, as we called them back then, we raised Irish potatoes, white potatoes, that's what they call them. You raise sweet potatoes. And if anybody knows anything about truck farming, there's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of hoeing. Everything was done back then. You did a lot of cultivating. I don't know what they do on truck farms today, but I mean, there was a lot of hoeing. Your butter beans, you had to shell them by hand. I mean, that was you pick them in the morning and you'd all sit around on the porch out there and shell butter beans and take them down to the market.
Did your grandparents hire other people to work for them?
No, see, I was up there, and then my Uncle Hein down the road, he had 3 boys. Johnny, Robert, and I actually had 4. Had Donald, and Donald died when he was young. Fell down the steps or somehow, and back then they didn't go to the doctor, so he had a concussion, I would assume.
So you had relatives that are
Correct.
cousins that
Yeah.
came and helped on this
Right,
farm.
right.
And then where and how was the produce sold?
We took the produce down what they called then, it was Produce Row on Market Street. At that time, what I can remember, there was a big vest sign. Now, probably older people would probably remember that. We left at 2 o'clock in the morning, drove down there. You would get breakfast, there was a little old restaurant down there. And Produce Row was, in fact, it's been there, and I don't know, later in years, you would go there, you would back into there, and you would sell to, I guess, individuals. Say about 6 o'clock in the morning, the guys from Produce Row would come through there and offer you much less than what you were asking, so you'd sell out so you could go back home. If you didn't, you had potatoes, well, you'd say you'd take them back home. But if you got tomatoes or something, yeah, we raised. I mean, for such a small farm, we raised everything. We had, and your Brussels sprouts now, where most people think of a Brussels sprout plant, we would cut cabbage in the fall of the year, it would go to sprouts and we would cut them. Until I was married, I never ate a Brussels sprout because that was a premium object that they could sell.
Well, how did people keep the vegetables over a long range of time?
Well, most of them was canned. You had sweet potatoes. We had your fruit cellar down. It was this dirt that goes down in the summer kitchen. You put them in there. Like your meat, I mean your sausage, summer sausage was hung in the smokehouse to cure. You had your salt brine, a big large box filled with salt, and you put hams in there, and they were cured in there, and that's where they would stay. I was glad when the first ham I ever ate that wasn't cured in salt, because you can imagine what a salt cured ham tastes like.
Ham as salty as it is, I think now,
Yeah,
to
but,
me.
His grandfather had one good saying.
Okay,
Well,
yeah.
more than one, but this one he always.
Well, I've told my boys, and my oldest boy is 43 now, and I've told him this, my younger boys when they were younger, this saying, and I don't think any of them really understood it. No two smears on one piece of bread. That was a conservative saying for a German. I mean, Germans learned to make do with what they had.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
Tell him about your water.
well, we had the old farmhouse. 2 stories, we had 3 bedrooms upstairs. There was only one of them, well, my aunt, when she stayed there, was helping, she would stay in one. And during the winter, when it was real cold and windy, that snow would come in around the windows and get in the house. My boys thought that was they don't believe that, you know, and we had no heat up there. And I had one year, I had something, my head was pulled to the side. I had some medicine, so I took it upstairs with a glass of water and it froze solid.
Oh my
You know,
gosh.
you had the old sleeping, the feather beds, you know, and I mean, you laid underneath them and it was like a, and we, back in the 50s, I mean, they cooked with wood yet, you know, so.
And let's talk about school. Talk about Pattonville High School, if you would, about how many were in your class. Do you remember? Was there very many?
It was actually when I graduated in 1962, it was fairly good size. I can't remember how many, you know.
And it was still across from Northwest Plaza.
Correct, yeah.
Where right now it's the middle school, Holman
They
Middle
had
School.
Holman middle
Right.
school, and you had the junior high was, as you're facing it from Northwest Plaza, was off to the right, and I don't know what that was that was Holman School
Yes,
back then.
yeah, right, yes.
And that's where you went to freshman, and then you had the juniors, sophomore, junior, and senior in the old school, you know.
Did you do any extracurricular activities at school? Any sports?
No, I didn't. I mean, see, that was the thing with us. We were expected, you had work to do, you know, and you had to be back home, you know. And
Well, we've talked to several different families actually during the course of our interviewing. We talked to Jerry Hahn. Did you know him, that lived up on Forrester? And his grandfather was truck farmers as well.
well, one names that I can remember, and she might, the Pruitts,
Exactly.
you know, and the Gettemeyers were down there. I don't know if they were in the Theses. I don't know if
Yes.
you heard much about them anymore.
Right,
You know,
yes.
they were, like I said, my grandfather's brother, Herman Schuette, and there was an Uncle Joe Meyer, and I mentioned that, we just talked to my cousin here a couple of weeks ago, one of them, and he didn't, you know, I remember Uncle Joe Meyer, and I don't know, like I said, there's Meyers around here, if they're, you know, I don't know, but,
Did your grandfather ever have a chance to go back to Germany? Now, he wasn't actually from Germany himself,
no,
was he?
his father.
His
Heinrich,
father.
Heinrich, yeah, he was born 1941.
1841.
1841, sorry. And he immigrated over here in 1867. She
And
went,
your father was born here in the
Correct.
United States.
Yes.
Did he ever have a chance to go to Germany and see any?
he was my father, and my father and my Uncle Bill were both in the service, World War II, and they both fought in the Pacific, you know. And as they always said, I mean, the war, like I said, World War II, I don't know what they're like now. I've got only 1 year, and I didn't have to serve Vietnam time.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, they always said that when he went into service, he didn't smoke or drink. Needless to say, when he come back, you know, so.
Have you been to Germany? Have you been
I
able to
haven't,
go?
I would like to. My youngest son, which he's 32, he's been over there twice.
Oh,
Yeah, we've got it's funny where we're at up there, and it's Frankfurt, the area we're right in, up in northeast Missouri. There's a lot of people that migrated from Cordy's, that came from Florissant area, that's up in northeast Missouri.
Cordy's and Grody's, and in their history books, they cite that they were from Florissant. They would come out on the train, and they would visit with others that were up there. And Grody's actually started St. Clements area, which is a small community up there, and that they would marry and stay. And the two communities, Florissant, Bridgeton, and St. Clement, are really connected.
Is that right? Well, my husband and I have gone to Harmon several times through the years, and I know that's a big German community. Have you been to Harmon?
Yes,
We-
just a few weeks
yeah,
ago.
just a few
Have
weeks
you
ago.
gone to their museum that was the schoolhouse?
We missed out on that. See, like I told you, we're into antique oil lamps, and I didn't really see as much up there. I've got oil lamps all the way back to 1830. You know.
Well, since because on one trip, we were able to go through their museum that's the converted schoolhouse, and they've done a miraculous job. They have racks and racks of pictures and information, and you might really enjoy seeing. That's well worth it, taking your
We
time to
thought
go
we
through
would
there.
find a Schuette name in that community, but when we were there, it was a festival day, and so they were extra busy. We have to go back on another day.
Exactly.
But we didn't find any evidence of a Schuette at that point.
Well, let's get back to James, your recollections of Bridgeton. So you spent pretty much your free time helping your grandfather doing farm activities, is that right?
Right.
Did you have a TV when you were growing up?
No, we didn't. I don't even think we had a radio. You know, I mean, my grandparents he died in 59.
Your grandfather died?
Grandfather died in 59. He was crippled up real bad with rheumatoid arthritis. But up to the last day, I mean, he worked in the field with, like I said, it was a lot of hoeing. And when I was first there, they picked corn by hand, you know. I mean, shelling corn, and then you'd load it in a wagon, a team of horses, and they pull it back, and you had to shovel it out, you know. And most everything we did was horse drawn, you know. It's just, and then as time went on, and they cut the tongues off a lot of them, and they would pull it with a small tractor.
Well, did you have a car then as a teenager? You're a truck driver, so I imagine you did learn to drive the truck.
I drove, but not until really I didn't get a car until I graduated from high school. you know,
Okay.
because my cousins down the road, they had a car, you know, and we drove, you know, you had the tractors on the farm. Our farm, the first tractor we had, which I thought was rather large, but it was a McCormick Daring 1020. And it started it on gasoline, running on kerosene. But I've seen them. We go up in the country, we go to these old threshers, and wasn't a very large tractor.
And it looked large to you at that time.
It looked large, and but the truck that we hauled to market down there, that was one of the first pneumatic tired trucks to international made.
Now, what does that mean, pneumatic?
Air in the tires, not a solid tire.
Really?
And shortly after that, from what like I said, my memory, shortly after that, after my grandfather bought that, he was so crippled up he couldn't drive it anymore, you know. But then Hein would drive it down to the market, you know. So.
After your grandfather died, what did your grandmother do? Did she stay in that house?
Yes, it was set up that she stayed in the house until she was, you know, passed away, you know. And that was.
Well, there was two of her daughters,
Yeah.
single daughters, were in the house with her. Well,
Frances.
one had passed away.
Yeah, my Aunt Elizabeth passed away early, you know, but see, they would stay and help, you know. Agnes never did get married.
And
How
then-
many-
The Frances, I'll take that back.
How
Frances.
many children were there?
9 children my grandfather had.
9 children.
5 boys and 4 girls.
And did they all live to be adults?
Oh yes, they did. I mean, that's something that my wife has learned, that a lot of the families prior, you know, my great-grandfather, a lot of those families didn't, you know,
But that we know of, all her 9 children survived. If any did not, there's no record of them. But the house was sold with the agreement that she could stay in it until she passed away.
And how old was she when she died, do you remember?
That I don't know.
It would have been between 59 and 62, 1959 and 1962. We haven't pulled up the death certificate on her.
So when she died, what happened to the house on Long Road?
I don't think it stayed there. That was one of the things. I graduated from high school and I wanted to stay with an uncle in O'Fallon, and there was a time period in there where you didn't get back there, and I don't really remember. Somehow that is lost from my memory.
That information just has kind of escaped you.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was like my Aunt Elizabeth. She died from leukemia, and I mean, my mother died in 1953, and I was 9, and I thought she lived, I thought she was there a long time, but she died in the same year. So, and my father was actually hit by a car.
Oh my goodness.
Crossing Lambert.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he was operated on, and he was kind of recuperating, so he stayed with us over there, and crossing the highway, he was hit by a car.
Oh my goodness. Speaking of Lambert, what was Lambert Boulevard and the airport like when you grew up? What was your recollection of?
Well, it was the airport. I can remember riding down there, and I mean, you was talking about just prop planes, 2-engine prop planes. See, my grandfather in the bedroom in there, he had a picture of Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh, barnstorming over there in Lambert Field, which was just like a little old barn. He had the picture of him out there hung in the bedroom. I don't know whatever happened to that picture.
When you say barnstorming, I don't know exactly what you mean by that. Could you kind of give us a little bit more detail that phrase?
It was kind of just aerial acrobatics, I guess, out there, because it just showed him by the barn with a picture, but they talked about that, apparently people would go out and watch him, and how he got that picture, whatever happened to the picture, I don't know. I'd like to have it, but a lot of that stuff, see in the old farm, my grandfather, they had a buggy, a perfect shaped buggy up in the stable, and it all, back then things were sold, and
right.
They weren't. Now if you had it, it'd be worth thousands of dollars,
Well, it's hard to keep everything through the years.
But my grandfather talked about when he was younger, when they were there, that they actually fished in Coldwater Creek. Oh. And that Coldwater Creek was between Airway Drive-In and our farm down, Yeah. And they fished in that. And he talked about, I've heard going over the Missouri River to St. Charles, driving a wagon over the ice-covered, Missouri River.
Yes.
So.
Did you go down to the river when you were a young guy?
One thing I can remember, we were a long ways from the river, but I remember going pheasant hunting out there before they put 70 in, and that where 70 comes through, going hunting out there, and that was more like a lot of willows and stuff along the river. Mm-hmm. But I remember that. But other than that,
And you talked about the cemetery where they would bury people.
Yeah,
Which
Mount Lebanon Cemetery.
Mount Lebanon.
Yeah, but our farm, before 70 come through there, they took I guess you call them indigent people.
Oh, yeah.
Would bring them in a, basically kind of like a utility vehicle, and put them in the back end of a pickup truck, and they would haul them down, and they buried them between, I guess on the bottom of Mount Lebanon Cemetery. It wasn't our ground, but they were buried down, and when 70 come through, then they dug them up, what was, left of them. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Where are your grandparents buried?
All my family's buried in St. Mary's Cemetery, almost all of them. And in fact, we got pictures of apparently we were some of the beginning, because the main part of St. Mary's Cemetery has got nothing but Schuette on it.
Oh, yeah. Where is that located now?
It's basically in Robertson between, let's see. You take Fifi, you got Missouri Bottom Road, and Fifi would run alongside of it, but I believe the last time we tried, they were working on the entrance, and you couldn't get in from Fifi anymore. You had to come in from Missouri Bottom. And basically, you were going through a field, so I don't know. We talked about going over there, but we made an attempt, and they changed things so much, you know. I'm not even sure where it's at anymore.
When you were growing up, do you remember going up to Brannicky Hardware?
Oh, yes.
Did you buy things from there, or I know they had several different things going on in the Brannicky Hardware.
Well, Brannicky, I don't know how long they've been there, but before the old building was there, you could go in there and ask for about anything, and they may have to go up on a shelf, but they had it, you know. I can remember the time back in the 60s, you had Lyle Downs and all them in there. I guess they're still there, I don't know.
Well, Lyle, we interviewed him and he talked about how for a while he was working in Partners and then he left and now he has his own appliance business, but yes, he was greatly involved in the Brannicky place. But everybody we talked to, you know, that grew up in Bridgeton has recollections of Brannicky Hardware.
All right.
Did you go there to collect your mail, or did you have mail delivered?
No, we actually had, what I can remember the first, and we were talking about that, it was a rural route. I think we always had mail delivered there, you know. Our long road at that time, of course, all that's gone. It was a big hill would come up, and we were on the top of the hill, and it would drop down, you know. And but the Millers live right across from us, and and that's spelled
M-U-E-L-L-E-R.
And that family was there, like I said, when I was there in the 50s. He used to farm with mules, but we find very little, you know, anything written about him. So.
Well, it's been interesting. We've interviewed people that have farmed, like Adele and Leonard Pruitt, and we've interviewed you know, people that lived on Old St. Charles that also had smaller farms, much smaller, but also raised a lot of vegetables. And we talked to Roy and Betty Brannicky. And so what we're trying to do is just get a real nice overall view of Bridgeton, maybe, you know, when it was more of a rural setting, maybe more farming, and so people that are coming up 20 years from now will have a knowledge of what Bridgeton was all about. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us thinking about growing up?
Well, like I said, it's just the idea of farmers now are not self-sufficient. We had, like I said, we had the hogs, we had horses, we had a cow for milk, we had chickens, which we raised our own chickens. We raised wheat on this. I mean, this wasn't a big farm. Raised wheat, which we back shortly before that. I don't know, must have been the late 40s, because they across Lambert there was a man by the name of Judy Davis that had the old threshing machine, and they just stopped that. But we raised wheat, you know, for our chickens, and we had horse corn, as they called it back then, you know. So
I think it was Elizabeth Gerdeman, right, that we talked to that grew up also down there by Taussig, and she was telling us something interesting, that during the Depression, when a lot of people were suffering so much, that the self-sufficient farming people were doing okay, because as you have said in this interview, they were used to being self-sufficient.
yeah, basically they were self-sufficient, other than your sugar and flour, you know. And I guess like anything else, I guess if you hard times, you did without that, you know. Of course, you couldn't do without flour. So I don't know.
Did you say the name was Elizabeth Gerdeman?
Yes.
That's her married name. I forget her maiden name.
Does that
Yes.
sound familiar to you?
Heinrich Schuette married a Gerdeman.
Well, maybe we can put you in touch with her, because she has a lot of records also from that she's keeping, and perhaps
That was the original wife of Heinrich, and they had 7 children, 4 survived.
Well, maybe
Nobody
we
knows
can.
anything about her in our family.
Could you spell that?
Well, she had an L in it, but that's debatable whether it's Gerdelman, sometimes 2 N's, sometimes 1.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably the same family.
Maybe we can give you some information, maybe an email address
I
that
would love
we
to
can-
have that.
share with you.
Well, if we go up to the community center, Cindy has a collection of some of the videos that we've done. We could loan you one.
Is her husband John?
He's deceased, I don't remember
Okay.
what it is.
How old is she?
She graduated from high school in 1950.
Okay.
Okay, well, yeah, she's younger, much older rather than I am. I graduated in '62, and most of my Hines kids, that was my uncle down the road now, Margaret was the oldest, and I'm not really sure how old she is now, she's up in years, but Hein would have been the one, he would probably, his recollection, of course, I mean, if they'd have got to my grandfather before that, my family was funny, I mean, they were just typical from what I've learned, old Germans, and they didn't talk much about what they,
Well, they didn't exchange a lot of Christmas presents either. He has an aunt who said that she remembers when she first got married and went to visit at Christmas time at his grandmother's house, and she brought the grandmother a set of pillowcases. And she said she almost cried because nobody,
Oh,
it was something unusual for her.
Yeah, that's where I tell my kids, when we had Christmas, we spoil them. But I mean, back when you didn't get anything, not that they were that poor, I guess, although they didn't have a lot of money, but you just didn't get Christmas presents, If you got a pair of gloves or a hat, something like that.
well, let's backtrack just a little bit. How did you two meet?
Well, because he didn't have a car, he had a best friend that he had gone to high school with. Did you?
Yeah, Joe Stein lived right across from the Lucas house. In fact, I've got 4 of the old beams that came from the Lucas barn at home.
Now, when you say the Lucas house, is that the one up
Right across from
there?
Brandy Q. Hardware.
Okay, thank you.
And when you say he lived across from the Lucas house, you mean across?
He was on
Avenue?
Raymond Avenue.
Okay.
And his dad actually built that house, and there was one of his uncles that actually played ball in, I guess, American Legion or something with my dad. And it was one of these things where even she got started, I got to talking, it was Wendell Stein, and there's a lot of Steins in the St. Mary's Cemetery, anyway, he played ball with my dad, and, my dad's, I don't know how old he'd be now, he died in '57, so.
He'd be
he
over
was-
100.
Yeah, anyway, I waited too long, he got up in years, and then just like that, he passed away, and we didn't, but he had a lot of recollection, I got more out of him than I got out of a lot of people,
But it was his best friend, and he was dating my best friend, and Joe had a car. And so we got together on a blind date. And we
She
spent,
must have been blind.
we spent our courting in a telephone booth and in my bedroom with the cord pulled around and the door closed so that I could talk privately. But they didn't have a phone at their house. And he would go out and stand in the phone booth.
Oh,
The old
wow.
filling station, I don't know, it was on Rock Road right across from Brandy Q. Hardware. I don't know what it was.
For a long time. He
Yeah.
got his dime's worth.
Were you working?
No, I was in high school yet. We met while we were in high school. I was a junior and he was a senior, and I was in Hazelwood High School.
Mm-hmm.
And we dated, and we didn't get to go around and do a lot unless Joe was, and then they broke up, so that kind of made it a little difficult.
Uh-oh.
But then he got a car, and then we dated, and we got married in 1962, 65.
No, where did you live when you first got married?
In Florissant, we moved into a Flamingo subdivision, which was the big thing back then. The houses were just being built one after another.
And what kind of work did you do, James?
I worked for 37 years in McDonnell Douglas.
Oh,
You know.
many, many, many people we've interviewed
Mhm.
have worked for
But-
McDonald Douglas.
Most of all my family, my Uncle Joe was a contractor, and my dad, and my Uncle Bill, and my Uncle John, all carpentered after, they didn't go into the farming, Hein farmed. Hein was the one that kept the farm going until, I don't know, something we've talked about, and I don't really have any recollection when they stopped farming on there,
What
Well-
kind of position did you have at Mac?
I was what you call a sheet metal operator. I did a lot of what they call hot forming and extruded aluminum, So
And now what are you doing? I'm assuming you're
I'm
retired.
retired. We got 30 acres in Frankfort, Missouri. It's north of Bowling Green, and I've got a lot of grass cutting,
And how many children did you have?
3 boys. The oldest one's 43, the younger one's 43, 42, and a 32, I think.
And where do they live?
The youngest one's in Austin, Texas, the oldest one's in Columbia, Illinois, and the middle one's in St. Louis.
Okay,
And 2 of the boys, they desire the city. I have no desire for the city at all. I know you said you were, but I like the country, you know.
Well, actually, he would have moved earlier on, except he was so close to work where we are, and so we bought the 30 acres back in 1970, around there.
Yeah,
And
well, we've
went up
had
on
it 40
weekends.
years, you know, because our oldest boy was in diapers. One of them was in diapers when we bought it, you know.
And when he retired, then we sold the house in Florissant and moved up there.
mm-hmm,
But like anything else, when we first bought that house in Florissant, we had cornfields next to us, you know. That didn't stay that way that long.
right, right. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time for us, and we'll try to exchange some information on some of the people maybe that we've interviewed, and as Joe said, we have some copies of their tapes, and you know, you could maybe borrow them and maybe come back to St. Louis, and then we could show you around in the Payne Gentry house here, and I'm sure you will enjoy seeing our items that we have. They'll probably remind you of a lot of the things you have. Thank you for talking to us today.
You're welcome,
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
Well, I